Get out of my seat. Her voice wasn't loud. It was sharp, like metal on glass. Passengers in the first-class cabin turned their heads as if the words had been flung across the aisle. Marcus Carter froze in the narrow walkway, boarding pass still in his hand. Gray hoodie, dark jeans, nothing about him, said billionaire. Nothing about him, said CEO. He looked like any other man trying to get comfortable on a long flight. Except this was his seat, 2 amperes. Paid, confirmed, scanned green at the gate. But the woman sitting in it, blonde hair pulled back. Sunglasses on inside the cabin, tilted her chin up like a judge refusing to hear a case. %, off, she added, her lips curling. The hush of recycled air thickened. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. He didn't raise his voice. That's my seat, he said, showing her the boarding pass, the block letters clear. Carter, Massachusetts, Russ's seat, 2 amperes. She barely glanced. Not anymore. Her arm rested across the armrest like a barricade. The Louis Vuitton bag at her feet looked less like luggage and more like a border wall. Someone coughed from row 3. Another passenger leaned just far enough to see. From the corner, a young woman held up her phone, the camera already recording. Her hands shook slightly, but the red light didn't blink. It glowed. Marcus's eyes moved past the woman in his seat, past the phone, past the stairs. He had seen this scene before. At 25, when he tried to upgrade to business on a connecting flight, the agent said, "Not the image we're looking for." At 32, when he walked into a boardroom and the secretary asked if he was the driver. Different settings. Same tone. Now, at 45, worth billions, partial owner of the very airline painted across the fuselage outside, here it was again, the presumption that he did not belong. A flight attendant stepped closer. Polished uniform, clipped smile. "Sir, economy is behind you. Let's not cause trouble." "Ghost trouble." The words cut deeper than the insult. Marcus held out the ticket again, steady, unshaken. "Run my name," he said softly. The blonde woman leaned back, triumphant. "Exactly, run it. He doesn't belong here." The cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. A hum of whispers, shifting bodies, eyes darting between the man who stood and the woman who Saturday. Marcus exhaled once, not in surrender, but in patience. Because storms don't need to be chased. They come on their own. The flight attendant's smile faltered when Marcus didn't move. He stood in the narrow aisle, boarding pass still extended like evidence in a trial. "I said economy is behind you," she repeated, firmer now, as if volume could erase the truth printed in ink. Marcus didn't blink. "This is my seat." The woman in 2 amperes laughed, not kindly. The sound was brittle, meant to entertain the onlookers. "See, he can't even afford a jacket and he thinks he belongs here." A ripple of whispers coursed through the cabin. A man 2 rows back shook his head. Another woman muttered, "Unbelievable." And in the corner, the young passenger filming whispered to her phone, "This is discrimination. Watch what happens." The attendant reached for the boarding pass, glanced at it, then frowned. "It says 2 amperes, her words trailed, but the woman in the seat cut her off. "He printed that at home. They do it all the time. Cheap ink, fake barcodes. Don't be fooled." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Passengers coughed, shifted, stared. Marcus's voice was calm, but the weight in it silenced the row behind him. "Scan it again, you'll see." But the attendant hesitated, eyes flicking between Marcus's hoodie and the blonde's tailored blazer, her designer bag gleaming by her feet. Appearances, not facts, were winning. From the cockpit entrance, another figure appeared. The captain himself. His voice carried the authority of metal wings. "What's going on here?" The blonde pointed at Marcus before anyone else could speak. "He's trying to steal my seat, won't leave." Showed some fake pass. The captain's jaw tightened. He glanced once at Marcus, then at the hoodie, then back at the woman's confident posture. His verdict came fast. "Sir, comply with crew instructions or you'll be escorted off this aircraft." The words landed heavier than turbulence. A few passengers gasped. One muttered, "That's not right." Marcus inhaled slowly. He thought of another flight years ago, red-eye from Dallas, seat upgrade denied with the same phrase, "Not your image." He remembered the sting then, He felt none of it now, only clarity. He spoke low, but firm enough for the rows around him. "You're making a mistake." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "No," Marcus replied. "It's a fact." The phone camera tilted closer. Whispers grew louder. A line had been crossed, and everyone in the cabin felt it. The woman in 2 amperes smirked, settling deeper into the leather. "Z? He knows he's beaten." But Marcus didn't move, didn't sit, didn't retreat. He stood anchored in the aisle, silent as a verdict waiting to fall. The captain's warning still vibrated in the air when the blonde woman moved. Fast. She snatched the boarding pass from Marcus's hand and tore it clean in 2. The rip echoed like thunder in the quiet cabin. "There," she said, tossing the halves to the floor. "Problem solved." "Oh." A chorus of gasps rose instantly. The young woman filming nearly dropped her phone. The man in row 4 leaned forward, voice shaking. "Did she just?" "She destroyed his ticket." Marcus's eyes lowered, steady on the fragments of paper at his feet. He didn't flinch. He didn't bend down, but the silence around him grew heavier, as if the whole aircraft had tilted. The attendant recoiled, hands hovering as if trying to undo what had just happened. "Ma'am, that's not protocol." The blonde cut her off, voice loud and sharp enough for every row to hear. "He doesn't belong here. Call security. Now." The captain's radio crackled as if on cue. He pressed the button, his tone clipped. "Gate security, we have a non-compliant passenger in first class. Stand by." Non-compliant. The word slashed through Marcus more than the torn pass. Not angry, just familiar. He'd heard it at 23 when a landlord refused to rent. At 30, when an investor pulled funding without reason. Always the same disguise. Policy, compliance, security. A man across the aisle spoke up suddenly, voice rising with courage he didn't know he had. "I saw it. His ticket said 2 amperes. She ripped it up." Another woman added, "He scanned green at the gate. I was right behind him." But the captain ignored them. His eyes stayed on Marcus. "Sir, sit down in economy, or you'll be removed from this flight." The blonde smiled triumphantly, as if she'd won a private war. She leaned back into the leather, sunglasses sliding down her nose. "Finally. Handle him." Marcus didn't move, didn't argue. He simply spoke 2 words, quiet but sharp enough to slice the tension. "Runit." The attendant hesitated. Passengers leaned forward, phones tilted higher. The hum of whispers had become a storm of voices. The captain shook his head. "You've lost your boarding document. You're out of order." Marcus's lips curved barely. Not a smile. Something colder. "Paper doesn't decide who belongs, truth does." The young woman filming whispered into her mic, her voice trembling with urgency. "They're really calling security on him, over a seat that's his." From the back of the cabin, footsteps thudded closer. The cabin door opened. 2 security officers stepped in, Navy uniforms pressed, radios buzzing. The blonde woman's face lit up. She pointed at Marcus like she was directing a play. "That's him. Remove him." The officers nodded, scanning Marcus up and down. One gestured to the aisle. "Sir, step aside." But Marcus didn't move. He stood tall, unshaken, like a stone refusing the tide. And for the first time since the boarding pass ripped, his eyes hardened with something more than patience. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The uniformed officer extended a hand, palm out. "Sir, make this easy. Step aside." Marcus didn't move. He reached into his hoodie pocket slowly, deliberately. For a heartbeat, the cabin froze, every eye fixed, every breath caught. But instead of resistance, he pulled out a slim phone, calm, controlled. He pressed one button and lifted it to his ear. "Rachel," he said, his voice level. "It's happening. Initiate protocol." Passengers leaned forward. The young woman filming mouthed the name silently, Rachel. On the other end, a crisp female voice answered without hesitation. "Understood, Marcus. Systems are live. Board is notified. Legal is standing by." The officer frowned. "Who are you talking to?" Marcus ignored the question. His gaze remained steady on the captain, whose jaw had tightened at the word protocol. The blonde woman in 2 amperes scoffed. "Oh, please. He's bluffing. Probably calling his cousin to come pick him up when he's thrown off." She laughed, brittle, searching for validation. But the cabin didn't laugh with her. Phones hovered higher. Eyes stayed locked on Marcus. He spoke again into the phone, each word deliberate. "Rachel, confirm seat assignment under my profile. Pull security footage from the gate scan. Yes, Marcus, came the answer. Already done. Boarding pass was verified. Time stamped. Green light confirmed. The officer shifted uneasily. The captain glanced toward the passengers, aware that the whispers were turning into murmurs of support. A man in row 5 stood halfway, voice sharp. He's telling the truth. I saw the scanner flash green. You can't erase that. The captain snapped back, louder than necessary. Everyone remain seated. This is a security matter. Marcus lowered the phone just enough for his words to carry. You called this security, I call it profiling, and it ends tonight. The blonde's smirk faltered. She gripped the armrest, knuckles whitening. You don't talk like someone in economy. No, Marcus replied, calm as stone. I talk like someone who owns the sky you're sitting in. A ripple moved through the cabin, gasps, whispers, a phone dropping to the floor with a soft thud. Rachel's voice returned, crisp, undeniable. Marcus, confirmation complete. Your name is registered under first-class seat 2 amperes. Boarding log shows tampering at 1842 by crew login. It's recorded. The attendant's face drained of color. She knew who had logged in at that time. So did the captain. The officer's radio buzzed, static cracking through the silence. Status update? Someone asked on the other end. Marcus raised the phone again, unshaken. Rachel, escalate. Tell James and Sarah the incident is live. Have David review the tampering. Yes, Marcus. They're listening right now. For the first time, the captain's composure faltered. He stared at Marcus as if trying to place a face he should have known long before, and the passengers' phones in the air, eyes wide, realized the man in the hoodie wasn't just another traveler. Something larger had just entered the cabin. The officer's hand hovered near Marcus's arm, but something in the man's posture made him hesitate. It wasn't defiance. It was authority. Quiet, immovable, undeniable. Marcus lowered the phone, but his voice carried through the pressurized cabin. You demanded proof. You ripped it up. Now you'll hear the truth. The blonde woman scoffed, but her laugh cracked mid-note. Truth? You're seconds from being dragged out. Passengers shifted in their seats. The young woman with the phone whispered, He's not bluffing. I can feel it. The captain squared his shoulders, desperate to hold the room. Sir, this is not the place to grandstand. Marcus's gaze locked on him. Neither is it the place to erase a paying customer. But here we are. From the phone, Rachel's voice came again, sharper this time. Marcus, the board is fully online. They want your go-ahead to confirm identity to the crew. He didn't answer yet. He scanned the faces around him, the officer stiff, the attendant pale, the passengers holding their breath like a jury. Then his eyes landed back on the blonde in 2 amperes. She sneered. Go on then. Tell us who you think you are. Marcus stepped closer, not threatening, but filling the space with presence. My name is Marcus Carter. His tone was steady, clipped, deliberate. CEO, majority stakeholder, 25% of Horizon Airlines. The words detonated in the cabin. Gasps, a stifled curse. Someone dropped a plastic cup, ice scattering across the floor. The young woman filming trembled as she whispered into her mic. He owns the airline. Oh my God, he owns it. The officer's eyes widened. He stepped back an inch, radio slipping slightly in his grip. The captain blinked, his jaw tight, as though the walls of authority he leaned on had suddenly turned to glass. That's impossible, he muttered, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. Marcus lifted the phone higher. Rachel's voice rang clear, amplified by silence. Board confirmation. Marcus Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings, owner of a controlling stake in Horizon Airlines. This cabin is his domain. The blonde's face drained of color. She fumbled for words, lips parting but no sound coming. Marcus turned his head slowly, scanning the cabin, his voice now firm enough to resonate through every row. You thought this was about a seat, but it's about dignity. You thought I didn't belong because of my clothes, my skin, my silence, but I built the sky you're flying in. Phones tilted higher, red lights glowing like tiny beacons of justice. Applause broke from the back, hesitant at first, then louder, spilling forward. The officer dropped his hand from Marcus's arm. The captain looked away, shame cutting sharper than turbulence, and the blonde woman, still clinging to the armrest of 2 amperes, looked frozen, as if the leather beneath her had turned to ice. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply stood in the aisle, calm as ever, and let the truth do the work. For 3 full seconds, the cabin was silent. Not out of peace, but shock. Then the sound erupted: whispers, gasps, the flutter of phones being lifted higher. A passenger in row 4 shot to his feet. I knew I recognized you Forbes cover 2 years ago. Horizon's turnaround story. That's him. The young woman filming choked on her own breath. Her voice broke into the mic. It's real. This isn't bluff. He's the CEO. The blonde woman in 2 amperes shook her head violently, as if denial could glue reality back together. He's lying. This is some PR stunt. But her voice lacked the venom from before. Fear had cracked it open. The captain raised his palms, trying to calm the rising tide. Everyone, remain seated. This is still under crew authority. But authority was slipping. You could feel it, like sand through a fist. Another passenger, an older man near the window, stood. I watched her rip his boarding pass. I saw it with my own eyes. This isn't about authority, it's about truth. Applause broke from the back. First a smatter, then more hands clapping, until the sound was undeniable. The attendant who had doubted Marcus stepped back toward the galley, her lips pressed white, eyes darting anywhere but his. She knew the cameras were catching every twitch of guilt. The officer who had reached for Marcus moments ago lowered his radio completely. His stance softened, head dipping slightly as though an apology was forming but not yet spoken. Phones streamed. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram hashtags were being born in real time. Sky Justice, CEO, Inswy, Ampere. Marcus didn't bask in it. He didn't need to. His eyes stayed calm, steady, focused not on revenge but on clarity. He turned toward the captain. You called security on your own boss. Do you understand what that means? The captain's face drained of color. His jaw clenched as he stammered. I followed protocol. No, Marcus said evenly. You followed prejudice. There's a difference. Oh. The cabin fell into a heavy silence again, but this time the weight wasn't against Marcus, it pressed down on the crew. The blonde in 2 amperes finally snapped, her voice rising with desperation. You can't do this. You can't just claim power like that. Marcus's gaze cut through her, sharp as steel. I didn't claim it. I built it. You tried to erase me, but you can't erase ownership. Applause thundered again, louder. Phones trembled in hands as passengers cheered, some standing to their feet in open defiance of the crew's earlier commands. And the woman who had once smiled in triumph now looked small, shrinking into a seat that no longer felt safe. The tide had turned. The sky itself seemed to tilt in Marcus's favor. The applause hadn't even faded when the captain snatched his radio, voice cracking under pressure. Dispatch, this is Flight 623. Request immediate police presence at gate. We have a hostile passenger. Hostile. The word sliced sharper than any insult yet. Phones tilted higher. Murmurs burst into outrage. He never raised his voice? Someone shouted from row 5. Another passenger added, hostile is ripping up someone's ticket, not standing calm with proof. The young woman filming nearly screamed into her mic. They're doubling down. He's the CEO, and they're still calling him hostile. Marcus didn't flinch. He raised the phone once more. Rachel, you heard that? Her voice answered instantly, steady and clear. Already logged. Dispatch escalation recorded. Corporate security is patched in. The board is listening live. The officer who had hovered by Marcus earlier wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. He stepped closer to the captain, whispering harshly, Sir, if this goes wrong, it's our badges. The captain barked back, desperate. It's procedure. But his words didn't carry the authority they once did. The blonde in 2 amperes clung tighter to the armrest, as though the leather itself could shield her from what was unraveling. This is insane. He's manipulating you all. Look at him, hoodie jeans. That's not a CEO. That's a fraud. Marcus finally turned to face her fully. His voice was calm, measured, but each syllable struck like a gavel. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your first mistake. Your second was thinking wealth has a uniform. And your last was underestimating who signs the checks for this flight. Gasps rippled again. Phones trembled in hands, recording every word. A man in business attire, 2 rows back, stood with visible conviction. I work in finance. I know his face. She's lying, he's telling the truth. The captain's jaw tightened, but his eyes flickered with doubt. He reached for the radio again. Marcus cut him off, his tone unshaken. Go ahead, call the police. When they arrive, they won't be escorting me. They'll be taking your statements, under oath. The words landed like a strike. The officer beside the captain stepped back, torn between loyalty and logic. Rachel's voice rang again through Marcus's phone. Marcus, Compliance Board just flagged the crew login at 1842. It's traced directly to Nicole Harris and Brian Foster. The attendant who'd smirked earlier stiffened, her face drained of color. Passengers caught it, phones zoomed in, capturing her panic in real time. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. The truth is out. It's logged. It's live. And it's bigger than this cabin. The clapping resumed, louder now, joined by cheers. The tide was irreversible. And for the first time, the captain didn't just look powerless, he looked afraid. The cheers died down only when Marcus lifted a hand, palm open, commanding silence without a word. The cabin obeyed. Phones still hovered, but voices hushed. He spoke evenly, each syllable a hammer. You tore my ticket. You called me hostile. You erased my name from your log, and now every witness here has seen it. The captain swallowed hard. The officer beside him shifted uncomfortably. The blonde in 2 amperes pressed herself deeper into the seat, eyes wide as if the leather might swallow her whole. Marcus raised the phone again. Rachel, execute suspension protocol. Start with crew. Her response came fast, sharp, undeniable, confirmed. Nicole Harris, flight attendant. Brian Foster, flight attendant. Daniel Pierce, captain. Effective immediately, credentials suspended. Access revoked. A chorus of gasps exploded in the cabin. The attendant Nicole lurched forward, face white. You can't, that's impossible. But before she could finish, her crew badge buzzed red. The digital lock on her tablet blinked and shut down. She tapped frantically, no response. Brian reached for his own ID, clipped at his hip. It buzzed, too red. He dropped it like it had burned his fingers. The captain staggered back a step, radio slipping from his hand. The device in his pocket vibrated, screen flashing. Access denied. The officer blinked in disbelief. Did that just? Yes, Marcus said, calm as stone. You've just been grounded. The young woman filming nearly screamed. He suspended them live. Their badges are dead. Applause roared again. Passengers clapped, cheered, some even stood in ovation. The cabin wasn't charged anymore, it was electric. Nicole's voice cracked as she pleaded, This isn't fair. We were following orders. Marcus cut her off with precision. Number, you were following prejudice. Fairness doesn't look like ripping tickets and calling the police on innocence. The blonde in 2 amperes stammered, pointing with a shaking finger. He can't really fire people on a plane. Can he? A man in row 5 answered before Marcus did. Yes, he can, and he just did. Rachel's voice returned, steady, final. Suspension complete. Reports forwarded to corporate ethics and FAA compliance. All logged. All permanent. Nicole sank into a jump seat, eyes wide, trembling. Brian leaned against the galley wall, colorless. The captain rubbed his temple, sweat beading on his brow. Marcus lowered the phone. His gaze swept the cabin, not gloating, not smiling, simply resolute. Justice doesn't shout. It acts, and you've just seen it. The applause swelled again, thundering through the fuselage, louder than the engines outside. And in seat 2 amperes, the woman who once laughed now sat frozen, realizing the leather beneath her was no longer protection, only evidence. All eyes shifted to 2 amperes. The leather chair that once looked like a throne now felt like a spotlight, burning down on the woman who had claimed it. Her sunglasses had slipped halfway down her nose. She tore them off, clutching them like a shield. This is ridiculous, she snapped, though her voice quivered. You're all letting him manipulate you. He's just pretending. But the words rang hollow. Too late. Too weak. Marcus turned slowly toward her, posture steady, voice low but sharp. You tore my ticket. You called me a fraud. You summoned security on an owner. That's not just ignorance. That's theft. That's humiliation. That's prejudice, dressed as confidence. Gasps rippled through the cabin again. The young woman filming whispered into her phone. He's confronting her directly. Listen to this. The woman in 2 amperes tried to laugh, but the sound cracked in her throat. No one will believe you. You look like... She stopped herself, but the silence finished the sentence for her. A man in row 3 rose to his feet, pointing. We do believe him. We all saw you rip that ticket. We all heard you scream for security. Oh, why? Another passenger chimed in. I recorded it. It's already live. Phones lifted higher. Notifications buzzed. The story wasn't just in the cabin anymore, it was spilling into the world. The woman in 2 amperes shook her head wildly, voice shrill. You can't ruin me over a seat. Marcus stepped closer, closing the space between them. His shadow fell across her. This was never about a seat. It was about respect, and you lost it the second you tried to strip it from me. The applause that followed wasn't tentative. It thundered. Passengers stood, clapping, some shouting, "Tell her!" and "That's right!" The woman covered her face with trembling hands. The power she wielded minutes ago had evaporated, leaving only the hollow echo of entitlement. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't sneer. He simply let the cabin's reaction finish what he had started. Behind him, Rachel's voice came through the phone once more. Marcus, your video is trending already. 500,000 views in 10 minutes. Every word is documented. The blonde gasped, spinning toward the cameras. No, you can't delete that. But the passengers didn't lower their phones. They only raised them higher. And Marcus, calm and unshaken, delivered the final strike. You thought erasing my name from a log would make me invisible. Instead, you made me unforgettable. The cabin erupted again, a wave of cheers crashing through the narrow space, drowning out even the engines. And in seat 2 amperes, the woman who once owned the moment now sat small, cornered, and undone. The cabin no longer felt like an airplane. It felt like a courtroom, and every passenger was now part of the jury. Phones hovered like evidence exhibits. Murmurs surged like closing arguments. The defendants sat in plain view: Nicole, Brian, Captain Pierce, and the trembling woman in 2 amperes. Nicole clutched her useless badge, eyes darting to Brian. Say something, she whispered, but Brian only shook his head, pale, jaw slack, the fight gone from him. Captain Pierce tried once more, his voice brittle. Ladies and gentlemen, we need order. This isn't— A passenger cut him off. Order? You called an innocent man hostile. You don't get to talk about order. Applause burst again. The captain's words shriveled. The woman in 2 amperes rocked in her seat, muttering, This can't be happening. This can't be real. Her fingers dug into the leather as if clinging to a lifeline already frayed. Marcus stood in the aisle, steady, hands at his sides. He didn't need to raise a gavel. The cabin had already judged. The young woman filming spoke up, voice shaking but firm. I have every second recorded, from the moment he showed his ticket to when she tore it, to when the crew erased his name. The world is watching now. Her phone pinged with a flood of notifications, likes, shares, comments piling by the thousands. She showed the screen. Over 1 million views already. The officer who had once reached for Marcus stepped forward, his tone hushed. Mr. Carter, I didn't know. If I'd known— Marcus met his eyes. That's the point. You judged before you knew. The man lowered his head, shame heavy in his posture. A passenger in the back raised his phone high and shouted, They tried to erase him, and now he's trending worldwide. Cheers erupted again, rattling the overhead bins. Rachel's voice rang through Marcus's phone like a verdict being read. Marcus, corporate legal confirms, tampering charge logged, crew suspension filed with the FAA, every word captured, every badge revoked. Nicole's face collapsed into her hands. Brian stared at the carpet, hollow. The captain leaned back against the bulkhead, sweat streaking his temple, and the woman in 2 amperes, once smug, once certain, was now a portrait of ruin, cornered not by violence but by truth. Marcus spoke at last, his words low, but clear enough for every soul aboard. You don't need a robe or a gavel to deliver justice. Sometimes all it takes is a seat. The cabin roared with approval, a verdict sealed not in ink but in applause. And for the first time since boarding, Marcus sat down. Not in defeat, but in triumph. Seat 2 amperes was his again. Marcus leaned forward in seat 2 amperes, elbows resting lightly on the armrests. He didn't look at the champagne, or the polished leather, or even the frightened woman beside him. His eyes fixed on the crew standing near the galley. You've heard the verdict, he said evenly. Now you'll hear the sentence. Nicole raised her head, mascara streaking her cheek. Please, it was a mistake. We didn't know. Marcus cut her off with a glance sharper than steel. You didn't care to know. That's worse. Rachel's voice poured through his phone, crisp and merciless. Marcus, termination protocol ready. Confirm if you want the system executed now. The cabin hushed, as if the entire plane leaned closer. Marcus didn't blink. Do it. A pause, then Rachel's voice returned, final as a gavel. Confirmed. Effective immediately. Captain Daniel Pierce, terminated. Flight attendants Nicole Harris and Brian Foster, terminated. Access revoked, pensions frozen, files flagged for misconduct review, logged and irreversible. The words hit like thunder. Nicole stumbled back, clutching her useless badge. Brian whispered something under his breath. Nonsense, denial, desperation. The captain slammed his fist against the bulkhead, but the sound was weak, hollow, already irrelevant. A collective gasp surged through the passengers, followed quickly by applause. Some stood, clapping hard enough to sting their palms. Others shouted, "Yes," and "That's justice." The woman in 2 amperes trembled, whispering over and over, "He really can. He really can." Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't even raise his voice. He leaned back into the leather and spoke with the weight of finality. You don't get to humiliate people and keep your wings. You don't get to erase names and still wear the uniform. You don't get to weaponize power and call it protocol. A man 2 rows back stood tall, phone raised. This is going viral. They'll never fly again. Not after this. Rachel's voice came one last time, sealing the action. Marcus, suspension complete. Crew access shut down mid-flight. Their profiles are locked. Nicole collapsed into the jump seat, shaking. Brian stared blankly at the emergency card in his hand as though it held escape. The captain's shoulders slumped, his authority stripped clean. The passengers roared louder than the engines outside. Phones captured every second, but no camera could capture the shift in the air, the collapse of prejudice, the rise of justice, the silence of authority dethroned. Marcus spoke once more, not to the crew, not even to the passengers, but to the principle itself. Justice doesn't wait for landing, it boards with me. The ovation that followed rattled the cabin walls like turbulence, but this time, no one was afraid. The roar of applause settled into a steady rhythm, like thunder rolling across the cabin. Marcus sat in 2 amperes at last, calm, composed, as if the chaos had only been turbulence passing through. The passengers leaned in, every eye fixed on him. The crew, stripped of power, stood small in the galley, badges dead, careers dissolved. The woman in 2 amperes had folded into herself, trembling in silence. Marcus rested one hand on the armrest, the other still holding his phone. He spoke softly, but every word cut through the pressurized air. You thought this was about a seat. It was never about a seat. It was about dignity, and tonight, dignity won. Phones captured it. Hashtags exploded in real time. Number, Dignity won. Number, CEO Justice. The young woman who had been filming from the start wiped a tear from her cheek. He never raised his voice once, she whispered into her mic. And he just changed everything. Marcus looked toward her, nodding once. Then his gaze swept the cabin. First class isn't leather. It isn't champagne. It isn't privilege bought with appearances. First class is respect. And if you can't give it, you don't belong here. The applause thundered again, passengers clapping until their palms stung, some standing to their feet in a wave of solidarity. The officer, once ready to remove him, bowed his head slightly. Mr. Carter, I'm sorry. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply replied, You're not apologizing to me. You're apologizing to everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Gasps, nods, a chorus of, That's right, rose from the rows. Rachel's voice chimed one last time through his phone. Marcus, media outlets are already requesting statements. CNN, BBC, Reuters, the world is watching. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with quiet resolve. Let them watch. I don't need a press conference. I don't need to shout. I am the result. The cabin went silent, awed. A sentence etched itself into memory, destined to headline clips and captions worldwide. He placed the phone back into his pocket, leaned into the headrest, and let the weight of justice hang in the recycled air. The blonde woman finally whispered, broken and small, I didn't know. Marcus turned his head slightly, his gaze cool. You didn't care, that's the difference. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. And with that, Marcus ended it. No grand gesture, no further words, just silence, the kind that speaks louder than any outburst. The young woman's phone camera trembled as she whispered her final caption for the stream. This is what justice looks like in 2025. Quiet, complete, irreversible. The cabin, once divided, now erupted one final time into applause, a standing ovation at 35,000 feet. And Marcus Carter, in his rightful seat, didn't smile. He didn't need to. He had already delivered the verdict.